Welcome to episode 44 of Dysfunctional Nerdcast. I'm Aaron.
I'm Josh.
And we got an awesome guest.
That we do.
So if you listen to the previous episodes, we gave a teaser that this person's favorite day could be October 13th.
Yeah, so...
Give the reveal of who this person is.
None other than Nick Mennell. From what movies?
He's, of course, Halloween 2007 and Friday the 13th 2009.
Therefore, the clue.
There you go. But this interview was so much more than just what happened in the movie. That was one of the most intellectual things I have ever heard in my life.
Oh, absolutely. It was a great conversation. That's what we had with Nick. And the way he explained, working in the industry and what it was like working on a horror film in this manner, we haven't heard before. And not throwing shade at any other guests we had at all, because we asked those questions, but hearing a different perspective, totally different perspective from Nick was mind-blowing at times. Honest, mind-blowing.
You can tell he's a really intellectual person, really smart,
yes.
well-spoken, so it's Juilliard trained. It shows.
I don't know. I'm kind of speechless over how great it was just to sit there and listen to what he had to say. I sat here in awe at moments. I really did. I don't know.
So hopefully you enjoyed it as much as we did. So without further ado, here's Nick Mennell. Well, I got to start with the toughest question of the podcast. Who is the best killer, Jason or Michael?
The way that I would look at this stage in my life is probably not saying one was better of the two evils, but I guess the way the story was told, I would probably say Michael over Jason.
Okay.
Oh,
very interesting. So you are one of the unique people that got to be killed by both of them. I don't think that's ever been done from the major franchises by anybody else. Were you aware of that at the time going into it, or are you? How much of a horror fan are you to follow that type of stuff?
So I'm not, and never was a huge horror fan. I was, I guess exposed would be the right word. I was exposed to horror by accident when I was really young, and it affected me deeply. I was pretty freaked out. I accidentally saw Friday the 13th, ironically the first one, when I was, I don't know, maybe 5 years old. I remember getting up and sneaking in and turning on the TV and turning on HBO. For some reason, it was on the TV, or I had access to it, and that's the movie that was on. And I was pretty freaked out. And then later in life, I think it probably gave me nightmares and stuff. So I don't think that it wasn't a pleasant experience. It was not something that I thought after again. And then later in life, I remember seeing The Exorcist with a friend of mine who convinced me that was a good idea, which it definitely wasn't at whatever age that was, 12, I think. And again, I was just terrified, and not in a pleasant way. I think most people that are fans of the genre have a pleasant experience. They enjoy the shock factor. It's like a roller coaster ride.
That's how I exactly feel about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a way that we all minimalize or sort of cope with and maybe practice the experience of mortality, and how to deal with that and experience that in a controlled, safe way. But when you have an experience like that and it stays with you, and it's haunting and it's disturbing, it's not a positive experience. It's not one that you seek out. And that was kind of my experience. And to be honest with you, it was one of the reasons I was very unsure whether I wanted to even do the movies to begin with. I think if I hadn't been fresh out of graduate school with a significant amount of debt, I might not have done the movies. But I think having had the debt, that helped push me over, and then I'd done a lot of time reading about studying Greek mythology and Greek theater, where really the horror franchise started, in that original Greek tragedy that was often extremely violent, extremely bloody, though more imaginatively so, to the point where historians have said that people would pass out in the theater, and there were women allegedly that gave birth in the theater from such shock and scare and heightened emotional duress. I think there's even a story of somebody dying of a heart attack. So the art form is pretty old, and I think that's how I justified it when it came across my table, and I decided to take part in it.
Was it also a way to face your fears somewhat?
That's interesting. Not consciously, but I'm sure in some degree. I mean, there's so many levels of metaphor there, or meta, as they would say out west. I think there were existential fears. There are existential fears in the entire experience of performance, certainly as an actor. I mean, the art of storytelling in and of itself is a reflection of the journey of life, right? The hero's journey. We are all on our own hero's journey that has a beginning and has an end, and that end, whether it's a curtain call in a theater or a death on screen or the end of a journey in a book, it's a reflection of death, of mortality, of the finite nature of our corporeal selves. And so I think there was probably quite a bit of that tied up in the experience of taking on the film and doing the film and
you opened my mind up to the whole thing. Like, I honestly never thought about horror in that way.
Yeah, me neither.
And now my mind is just like on this totally different scope of what people grasp when they're watching these. I never thought about it like that. It's very interesting.
I mean, I was, when I got into theater, I was very, very young, and I got into it as somebody who was kind of made interested in it through the theatricality of the Mass, of church. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but when I was about 4 or 5, and I was brought to church, a Catholic Mass, there was something about the solemnity and the presentation and the performance of the priest that I found mesmerizing. And I would leave, and I would go back home, and I would empty out all my drawers and place the stuffed animals in the pews, and I would recreate the Mass. And at that age, I didn't really know what it was to be an actor, and probably didn't even know what it was to be really a priest. But all I knew is that there was something deeply existential and spiritual in that experience for me. And so I carried that understanding, or that experience, that curiosity is a better word, through my entire education in the theater and my career in it as well. And even in pieces that people wouldn't normally look at and think maybe about, the deeper sides of it, I certainly was. I remember sitting on both of those sets thinking, why do we do this? Why do we tell these stories? Why do we like to consume these stories? And more importantly, why do the characters in these stories, why do the heroes in these stories have the journeys that they have, not only in film and in books, but in life? In other words, why does a serial killer become a serial killer? Why does a murderer become a murderer? And I think that's why, when you asked me earlier, which was the quote unquote best, I liked the way that the Michael story was told, because it delved into some of that. It attempted to answer some of those questions, the question, the almighty question of why.
Your background was in Juilliard, right? You went to Juilliard.
Yes.
And just listening to you talk about, what you just said, there's a perception out there with, people who aren't horror fans that, especially the critics out there, the horror's looked down upon as a genre, Have you felt like in your career or your other peers that you're almost on like the opposite side? Like you listening to you said it's like a journey. So playing these roles in a horror film and your Juilliard background, how has that prepped you for that role and for the horror roles? And is it almost like an homage to the Greek tragedies that you spoke of earlier?
For me personally, it was. And again, there's probably an element of justification in that, and, one comes out of a program like Juilliard with pretty big aspirations, if any. And so I think for myself, I wanted to believe that I was contributing. I think that's the biggest thing, the most important thing for all of us, is to feel that we are contributing somehow, and to the overall benefit, the net benefit of the human experience, and not detracting from it. And I think that was probably one of my biggest fears is, was this thing that I was doing, was it going to, in the end, have a benefit and be uplifting to people or not? And I think for the most part, most people, and definitely myself, have a dubious answer to that. I don't know that most people would look at the horror genre and say, okay, this is benefiting society. I think most people look at the horror genre and think this is probably not doing much good for us, not doing much good for our psyche. So I had to ask those questions. And I think, the best way that it was answered for me, man, your listeners are probably going to be like, what is this guy talking? This is the weirdest conversation they've ever heard.
They're used to our conversation, so don't worry about that.
Good. I imagine them all like disconnecting by now. But there was a really famous father of modern acting, father of the theater, named Konstantin Stanislavski. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he was a very famous Russian. He founded and ran the Moscow Art Theater at the turn of the 19th century in Russia. And he taught people like Michael Boleslavsky and later Stella Adler and Lee Strasberg, who then taught actors like Marlon Brando that completely transformed the theatrical experience. And he has a book called My Life in Art, and it's really beautiful and really interesting. And he talks about the art of theater, and particularly just art in general, and how important it is not to try to, I guess I'm using, these aren't his words, I'm using these words, but not to sometimes overthink it, that art in itself is an elevated form of human experience. We're the only creature on this planet, well, one of the only, at least, that can create art, certainly perform art consciously that we know of. And it's important not to overthink that too much and overburden it, because sometimes when you try to do too many big things with and through the art form, it fails. It's one of these weird paradoxes. It's like, sometimes the things that you create with less conscious effort are the ones that end up being the more profound. Sometimes the ones that, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but the people that go out and try to really conscientiously make an quote unquote artistic film, and it's just not interesting or doesn't succeed. So the point of all that is that I think it's important to keep that in mind when you are experiencing any artistic genre. It's relative to the person that views it. It's relative to the person that experiences it. So everybody's as good a judge of that question as I am. That being said, from my personal perspective, I think there are, the best way that I've been able to see it or experience it or think about it are in terms of levels of energy, right? So you go about your daily life. Let's say that, any given day for any one of us is its own hero's journey, is a story that we could tell at the end of the day or the next day. Say, let me tell you about my day yesterday. This is how it started. And throughout that hero's journey of a day, right, which includes getting in a fight with the guy at the car wash, and breaking up with your girlfriend and making up with her at the end of the day, and proposing, and whatever it is, you go through these levels of energetic experience where you feel lower energy experiences and higher energy experiences. And I think that's something everybody could relate to. Maybe you, in a simple way, you have a junk food lunch, which is maybe a lower energy experience, and then you go out and you go on an incredible date, and that's a higher energy experience. That's the way that I experience art in general, and particularly film and television. I think they exist somewhere on this spectrum of energy, and they are a transformation and a retelling of that energy. That's really all it is. I mean, all it is light being captured and reflected. Whether it's from a mirror or through a TV set, it's just a reflection of light, which is a reflection of energy. So I think that there are higher forms of that in this business, and I think there are lower forms of that. I think there are, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with budget. It doesn't necessarily have to do with, celebrity. It doesn't have to do with, distribution or production. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it's just the collection of the individual parts. They come together and they make something that's special. And I like to believe, I don't know that it's true, and I don't actually think it's true, but I like to believe that in collected awareness, if and when a group of people get together and they have a heightened awareness towards intention alone, so their intention is collected towards telling a story or elevating an art form or a human experience, the collection of that intention becomes a higher energetic experience and product and outcome, and that can be transformational. It can be transformational in film, it could be transformational in television, it could be transformational in a painting. And so I think the judgment that you guys are talking about comes somewhere from that either there's a lack of respect for the art form or for the storytelling, and in some cases it's a deserved lack of respect. I don't know that there's a lot of people that are creating horror movies with higher artistic intentions.
But that could go that could go for any genre. You could say the same about whether it's a 100%. Drama. Yeah,
you are absolutely right.
I just found that interesting because we talked to Adrienne King from the first Friday the 13th, and she told us a story about Betsy Palmer struggling with, the critics' response to her role in that, how it really saddened her that. And then later on, she realized there was such great fan response from it that she could care less what the critics thought. So it's just an interesting take on, what your thoughts would be.
I mean, I won't name names, but I have, several friends and very, very close friends and colleagues now from Juilliard and others of those schools at the time that have gone on to have, the highest success imaginable in this business. Academy Award nominees and winners. And some of them did say to me, why are you doing this? Like, why are you doing these films? And said it in a way that intimated that it was not, there was something better. There was something better out there.
Right.
And also, that being said, there is a thing, I don't know how true, I think it is. I think it's true to a degree where you can easily get pigeonholed. Of course it's true. It's true in life, right? It's like, if you go, using the example I gave you throughout your day, and, you go to that car wash I was talking about, and you see the guy at the car wash, you're not seeing necessarily a human being, you're seeing the guy that works at the car wash. And, or you go to the grocery store and you check out, often we don't see the person behind the register, we see the grocery clerk. And the same with in acting. If you've seen somebody in a horror genre, I don't think you're seeing the actor sometimes as much as you're seeing the genre. And that becomes part of your identity. And it's a fear for a lot of actors getting pigeonholed in that. It's a thing. It happens. And in that way, I think sometimes Hollywood can be very simple-minded, and if they a lot of the people, the decision makers in Hollywood, I had an agent say this many times, they want to be told. They don't want to be the ones to take the risk. They want to be told who you are and what you're good at. So if they open up your resume and you've done a couple horror films, then they assume that's the genre that you're meant for. And then it can become difficult. Like a lot of comedians have difficulty crossing over. Some of them have done it and had tremendous success, and I love seeing that, by the way. Just like, some great dramatic actors have also crossed over and been very funny in comedies. And so I think there's a bit of that fear. Yes, I think to a certain degree, the horror genre is looked down upon. I think in some instances, it's earned it. I think there's this is just a matter of opinion. And by the way, this is important because you brought it up. I don't want to forget it. The fans changed my mind about a lot of this stuff. I think after having, had two of these films in the bag, I really was dubious is the best word I could think of about, how I had contributed to the art form. And then I met the fans and I was blown away. There were such lovely, interesting people that adored the genre for whatever reason, and you guys are of that elk. There's a reason that you connect to it. And and the only thing that I would encourage is to explore that reason and to be curious about that, because it's curious to me. It's interesting to me. I think there's a lot to be found there and discovered there, and there's a lot of richness in that. But to have a judgment about it is pointless. It doesn't matter. If you enjoy it and it moves you and it interests you and it's uplifting to your life, then again, as long as it has a net benefit effect, then there's nobody that really can say a whole lot about it. If it is having a net negative effect, then it's something I think that we should all look at.
Right.
But my experience in general of the fans was that it brought a certain joy to them, and they were not what people would think. People I think would think that horror fans are kind of creepy and macabre, and
we say this all the time, and it's like almost embarrassing sometimes that, oh, you like horror, oh, okay, you're one of those people.
Yeah.
Well, no, they're like, seriously, being part of that community, they're some of the nicest people. I've never seen issues at conventions. And, even from the actor standpoint, you guys are some of the most responsive people of communicating with your audience and getting into the community. And it's I think it's just a give and take back and forth between the fans and the actors.
And you really hit it on the head too, with like you noticed how passionate the fans are. Every guest that we've had on from the horror genre says the same thing, like how surprised they were when they first went to their first conventions and they were signing autographs, and people are like, you were Leatherface in part 2, awesome. Like, they really look up to these people. You guys as actors and actresses, the community is there, and it's very passionate, and every single guest we've had on says that and recognizes it. And I think that lends to the art form in and of itself, because when you do make a really good horror movie with a good story, and it's not just about the blood and the gore, when you have that good scary story and it gets to your soul, that's the really good horror movie. And in a way, it's almost a drama with just a little gore element to it.
Yep. I think that's what it should be, at least.
So as a stage actor, and I guess, which do you prefer more? Do you prefer the stage acting versus the movies and TV? And I feel like I may know your answer based on, it's probably, you might feel they're equal based on what you actually put into it and how you develop that character and how much you want to apply yourself to whatever it is you're doing. But do you have a preference in one or the other?
It's a tough question, so I like to go with my gut response when there's a question I don't have it's hard for me to figure out intellectually. And my initial response is that it is the theater. And I think it's because it's so, there's an electricity to it and a connectivity and a communal feeling and gathering with this group of souls in a space where you're not only telling a story and going on a journey really collectively, but you're experiencing, as a performer, you're getting to experience the audience as they are experiencing you. There's something really, really powerful about that. And again, it's the origin of all of it anyway. So I would have to say that. But of course, there's so many amazing and fun things about film and television. They are very different. And I think at the end of the day, it's just about the story that's being told, Yeah, I think if it's a really great, engaging story, then I think maybe that's first and foremost.
When you're on stage and there's a live audience in front of you, I'm sure you've been to concerts and you see the musicians up on stage. When the crowd really gets into it, they feed off of that, and they start to perform a little bit better, like the band does. But when you're there and you have the lines and you've developed that character on stage, do you tend to see out in the audience and you talked about that electricity, how you're grasping that from them, and does that uplift your performance that particular night? Could it?
Not only could it, or
it does.
Yeah, it needs to. It should, for it to be the apex of what it can be, for it to be the penultimate human experience in that art form. Then I believe, and I think a lot of actors would agree, that's exactly what has to happen, what you just described, which is that you are taking everything in and experiencing everything in the moment, both audience and actors as participants. There was somebody, when I was in school, I think it was Ian McKellen, who came to talk to us, and he was just lovely and so inspiring. And I asked a similar question to him, and I think it was qualified more in the sense, how do you keep it fresh when you've done it so many times? Does it not just sort of become rote? And he said never, 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 never. He said, stand up. I was in a room with maybe 30 people, 30 of my colleagues. So I stood up, and he stood up as well. And he, from memory, recited a sonnet to me, one of Shakespeare's most famous sonnets. And it's like time stood still. I'll never forget that moment. It wasn't just because it was Ian McKellen. It was because of what was happening in that room. And the point that he was making, which is that he had recited that sonnet 1,000 times, but he had never recited it in that room under the life conditions that he brought in that very day, that very moment, in front of all these souls that he had never met before, and to this other human being who he had never seen before. And all of that was so profound and electric. I'm sure that I'm not the only one that has never forgotten it. And it was a really, really important lesson to me. And I think it is one of the great values of the theater. I mean, guys, I think what I believe about life in general is that we are all here telling stories of sorts. We're here as manifestations of consciousness for the sake of experience. All of us, we are all on these heroes' journeys for the sake of the greater experience of the whole. Something desires this experience through us. And that's all that film and theater is. It's a reflection of that journey of humanity. We are watching these journeys on the screen in the way that I believe a soul might watch the journey of their former life or the life of a loved one. You know, I think that's what it's all about. And that's why I say it's one has to be, I think, again, this is totally my opinion. I believe that the best theatrical experiences for me, both as a performer and as a participant, have been the ones that have been heightened with that awareness and that intention. And I think that's part of the purpose. And I think you can really start to transcend when you experience that. And I think you can experience it in any genre. And my thing when I was shooting Friday as an example, I used to kind of poke the producers and say, imagine if, Michael Bay, I think, as you guys know, produced
right
Friday, and I had just worked with him on a different project prior, which is why I got the job, and which is probably why I said yes to it back to back after having done Halloween. And it was really, honestly, both those movies are about working. First one was about working with Rob Zombie, and then it was about Michael Bay. And it was kind of like the genre and the film came after the fact. And I said to them, or at least to Bay and his producers, I remember saying, imagine if all these stories that were told, everybody who played a part in telling it approached it with that kind of reverence and that kind of care and that kind of heightened awareness, how much better these films and these stories would be. I mean, I think they would be really, really profound.
We wouldn't have Jason X then, though.
That's right. That's part of the hidden duality, right? You need a scale in order to compare what is good to what is not good.
Did you have any reservations going into a remake, or what are your general thoughts on remake? I mean, both movies you did were such iconic films to start with. Was there any hesitation, like, what am I getting into based on the fan base to start with?
No, I can't say that I did. I think I was, if anything, I was excited to think about the people that had been involved in those early films that had come out and had really, really great careers. Jamie Lee Curtis and
Kevin Bacon,
a lot of those. Johnny Depp. So I think it was just excitement. I don't think there was reservation, and I believed in both Rob Zombie and Michael Bay as storytellers. I think Rob, even though he's much more focused on the genre, is a remarkable storyteller, and by the way, this is where a conversation with me is less applicable, because I like to think deeply about all these things, but Rob's a deep thinker, but he's much more an artist, which is not an intellectual thing. Like, this conversation doesn't really apply. He creates art. That's what he does. And that art is so fulfilling and interesting when it's consumed and experienced. And Michael Bay is a remarkable storyteller. I don't know that he's also an artist, but in a different sense. He's more of he knows how to tell a story and play heartstrings like nobody that I can think of that I've worked with. And he's also extremely demanding, requiring the best of people. Some people don't like that. Some people love it. I happen to really, really like and appreciate that about Michael. So yeah, so they were both projects I think that I was just excited about. I think if anything, the only fear and hesitation was what you had already touched on. And I think maybe to a degree actually did happen, which is getting looked down upon and getting stuck in that genre and not being able to do the many, many other things that in films that I would have wanted to do.
I wanted to ask you about Rob Zombie. I mean, we're huge fans. I think Devil's Rejects is a top 10 movie of all time for me. We're excited for 3 from Hell coming out. So do you have any unique experience you can share with us working with Zombie on set? Anything funny happen or?
Oh yeah, I have a couple great ones. I really, really adored Rob. And one that I don't know that many people know is that, that leather jacket that I wore in Halloween?
Yeah.
Yep. Do you remember that leather? So that was actually Rob's leather jacket that he wore as a bicycle messenger in New York City, which is one of his first jobs. He was working as a bicycle messenger and then sort of moonlighting as, I believe, a set designer. And somewhere along that journey came across one or two of his bandmates and just randomly said, let's start a band. And they did, and that was White Zombie. So I love that. I love that I was wearing this jacket that, that was going to be seen by millions of people now, and certainly his fan base, which is huge, that was worn on his body and his skin way before any of this had even been dreamt of.
It's almost like he knew. It's like he knew that that jacket had a purpose in life to keep it that long,
Yeah, right. Yeah, to keep it that long and randomly to put it on me. I mean, Rob and I are nowhere near the same size. Somehow it worked. Somehow it fit. And I love that. So that was one. The other one, which is really interesting and I guess a bit existential. And also I think points to this, I can't think of a better word or phrase, this in-touchness that Rob has, is that he had auditioned Christina Klebe first for Halloween and booked her. And I rarely would book off of tape. I was always more successful in a room, I think, than I was on tape. But I had put this tape in anyway. And he had told me, we sat down at lunch one day and he said, I was looking through all these tapes. I don't remember how many there were, but, dozens, if not hundreds. And he said, the moment that I saw you, I knew that you would have chemistry or connection with Christina. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this story.
No.
And Christina and I kind of looked at each other and were blown away by that because we had known each other for 7 years prior.
Oh, wow.
We had met when we were both in theater school, completely out and away from Hollywood. And, had known each other for a long time and we're friends. And somehow, he saw that tape. If you read Malcolm McDowell's Blink, it might give you some insight. But
he saw the chemistry that was obviously there just in that tape. That is crazy.
But we weren't, not to be clear, we weren't reading together in that tape.
Right.
That was just me. That was a tape alone of me. She had already been cast, and somehow he put the two together. So that's another fun story.
So does that kind of lend to him being the artist? He had like two colors of paint in a way, like you were, male paint, she was female paint, and just knew that you guys would be together, like it would work.
I think that's a really, really great metaphor. What I understand and believe of the artist is that the artist works from a different part of the human mind, which is typically understood to be the right brain. And there's another amazing book called Zen in the Right Side of the Brain about a neuroscientist or a neurologist who has a stroke and loses the capacity of her left brain and lives in her right brain, and understands in that experience that that's where all art, not just art, but where all spiritual and religious experiences come from. So I think there's something to that. I believe that consciousness is not a function of the human mind. I believe consciousness is fundamental to all of existence and all of our experience. And because of that, I believe Rob had tapped into something that was part of a greater connectivity or human experience. And that's in part with what the artist does.
I have to ask, with how close you guys were in the connectivity there, did that make the scene that you guys filmed any more awkward, or did it make it less awkward based on the subject matter? Like, if you know each other that well, it kind of gets a little weird, I would think, but maybe it makes it easier.
She said, that was the hardest thing was for Christina. I think in general, maybe I shouldn't say this anymore in this day and age, but at least at that time before that, I think it was always, in my experiences, much more difficult for the woman than it was for the man, because women are being objectified more than men are in life in general. And that's not easy. That's not easy to live in that experience. And she knew that she was, to a degree, not only going to be objectified in the film, not by Rob, but certainly by viewers somewhere on this planet. But I think also in the room at the time when we were shooting, there was some characters that were, for lack of a better explanation or lack of a better word, in the state of objectification, in a state of lust, let's say. And that was really uncomfortable for her. And so, to Rob's credit, he cleared the room so that it was only really who she, or I think he offered to clear. I don't know if he did clear the room, but he offered to clear the room, I think. But I remember her saying to me, she's like, "I'm so glad this is you, because it would have been so much more awkward had it been somebody that she didn't know." So I think it made it less awkward and kind of
provided some kind of comfort level, yeah,
trust and everything.
Yeah. How was it working with both Derek Mears and Tyler Mane? What are some of the differences or similarities that you saw between them while filming?
They're really, 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 really different human beings. I know Derek a lot more than I got to know Tyler.
I've met both, so I'm not, but Derek Mears is probably the nicest human being maybe on the planet. Not that Tyler's not a nice guy, but Derek Mears is just like ridiculously nice.
No, I think Tyler would be okay with that. Tyler's much more a Wolverine type character.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Derek is a remarkable human being, a beautiful soul, a beautiful spirit who I absolutely adore, and have, the Halloween experience was very different in many ways from Friday, but in this way in particular, where the Friday cast, like all of us became very, very close after the film. Those are still some of my best friends, and we all spend a lot of time together to this day, and certainly have in all the years that have passed. And we just got lucky. We had a really amazing cast and crew, just really, really, really great people. And Derek is one of those people. He's a beautiful human being. He's a kind and generous soul. More than that, he's really, really, really funny. he's very, very funny and super talented. I don't know if you ever have a chance, you should try to catch one of his improv shows. He does a lot of comedy improv.
I did not know that. I'll definitely check it out.
Oh my gosh, he's hilarious. He's a lot of things that you wouldn't imagine Derek to be. Yeah, really. So it was really great to get to know him and spend time with him. And I didn't have the luxury of doing the same with Tyler. It was a different set. We're shooting in LA. People went home after work, whereas in Austin, where we shot Friday, we all were in the city together. Actually, while we were there while they were shooting a Terrence Malick film that I coincidentally had friends in. So it was like, two kind of crews of us, two film crews hanging out together in Austin. So it was just a completely different and very, very fun experience. For me, it's always been more fun when you can shoot on location than when you're shooting in a city that you're living in.
Makes sense. Yeah, so is there anything you can let us know what you're up to now, or anything we can help plug for you? Where can people find you if you want to be found?
So I left the entertainment business about 2 years ago, and for a lot of reasons. It was a culmination of things, and a lot of stuff that we talked about, actually, that I hadn't kind of found the deep inspiration that I'd wanted to, and didn't feel that I was able to contribute in the highest way or at my highest potential. And also suffered the tragedy of the death of one of my dearest friends, Nelson Ellis, who you probably know, who was a tremendous actor and human being. And so I left the entertainment business, and had a couple years before that gotten involved in business in general, in marketing and business development, kind of as fun or for fun, because I had a lot of time free when I was working in the theater. And so for the last couple of years, I've been really just focused on developing various businesses and partnerships. I'm a partner in a company called Direction.com, which is a really great internet marketing and development company out of Washington, D.C. And most recently have become a partner in developing a business called Juicy Ladies, which is an incredible organic cafe out in Los Angeles, which if anyone's out here, you should definitely check out. There's one in Woodland Hills and one in Pacific Palisades. And really that's where my focus is. The only thing in the entertainment business that I've been up to recently is I have some friends that have been sequestered by Netflix to take over the dubbing of some foreign properties that Netflix has bought for domestic distribution. And so I've been involved in dubbing some of these films and TV series. Actually, we've only worked on one so far, but there are many more to come. And those will be really cool and really exciting. And I'm excited about that because I think there's a lot of really amazing storytelling that's happening around the world. And with this new ability to distribute it anywhere, and the way that technology has allowed dubbing to be so facile, anybody can watch this stuff now and understand it and experience it. So we're going to not only get to see and experience stories from all over the world, but I think those stories will be self-informing, and they will affect the way that we tell stories and hopefully improve them. So that's where I'm at right now. I've also written a play, which I have just finished, and I'm going to be holding a reading soon that hopefully at some point you guys will hear about, and who knows, maybe I'll end up back in the business at some point. But that's where I am today.
Very cool. It's a full plate.
Yeah.
That sounds like something different, exciting, and another chapter in your life, right?
It is. It's my version of Daniel Day-Lewis's going off to Italy and becoming a shoemaker.
Right on. Gotcha.
All right, guys. Well, I've enjoyed my time with you. I appreciate it.
So that was our conversation with Nick Mennell. Wow.
It's really good. I really enjoyed that.
Insightful, man.
I feel fantastic. Like we could just talk life with him.
Yeah.
Like, he's the type of guy, like when you're sitting at the bonfire, you just want to listen to and have those, I don't know, faith stories, whatever, the purpose of the world stories. What is our purpose?
Yeah. And like in a respectful, meaningful way, and I think, and I know he would listen to everybody's perspective. And he never once preached. He never said anything. He just always, he said, in my opinion. And this is just what one man thinks. And that's what really made this conversation. I can't even call it an interview. It was a conversation. It's what made it so good.
But I think if he doesn't open your mind to something, you need to go back, re-listen to it, and to open your mind up. Think of possibilities,
Absolutely. And honestly, it's a clean interview. So there's no cursing in it. I can't remember that we cursed once. So it's a good thing. I'm going to let my kid listen to this because there are awesome things that this guy is saying.
It translates to everything. I mean, even if he gave an example of the grocery store worker, even if you have the most mundane task, it doesn't mean you've experienced the person across from you that could offer something. You haven't shared that experience with that person at that time, in that space. If you really do apply that to everything in life, it's a better place.
Is it the whole put yourself in another person's shoes kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean,
see the
basically.
person for, who they are, not what they are.
I hope we're not coming across preachy because that's not what we're trying to do. And I don't think that's what Nick did at all either. No. But it made me think, which was really appreciative of the podcast.
Yeah. And it does. It just opens up your mind. So our podcast is now changing. No, just kidding. I said it before. It's just a wonderful experience to talk to somebody with a different outlook. And everybody other guest that we had was wonderful and awesome, and we really like them all.
And that's why we do this.
Yeah,
this is the entire purpose,
right? And to give you guys different perspectives. Everybody has had a different perspective on everything, so we're giving you another one. So we hope you appreciate it and really liked it, because I know Aaron and I both like this conversation a lot.
So hit us up at email dysfunctionalnerdcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought. Give us the 5-star reviews on iTunes, of course.
Check us out on Facebook. Let us know what you thought about the interview on Conversation. Oh, see, I slipped. Conversation on Facebook. Let us know. And maybe we could talk more through Facebook or something. Check us out on the Twitter handle, Aaron.
@DNerdcast.
Right? Instagram and YouTube for the toy review videos. And subscribe on your favorite podcast directory. Don't forget, so you never miss an episode. It's as awesome as this one.
That's right. So until next time, may all of your Fridays be so insightful.